The night sky above Seoul turned strange and wrong. Dr. Teo sat in front of her computer screens at the UN Space Defense Center, watching numbers and signals that made no sense. She had worked as an astrophysicist for 15 years, studying the stars and listening to the deep sounds of space. But tonight something was different. Something was coming. The screens in front of her showed red lines moving across black maps. These lines meant danger. These lines meant something large was approaching Earth from the dark space between stars. Teo leaned forward, her eyes growing wide. Her hands moved quickly across the keyboard, typing commands to make sure what she was seeing was real and not a mistake. "This cannot be right," she whispered to herself. The numbers did not lie. There were ships, many ships. And they were moving toward Earth at great speed. Teo picked up her phone and called Min-A, her closest friend since university. Min-A worked as a historian at the Seoul National Archives, but Teo needed someone she could trust to hear what she was about to say. "Min-A, I need you to listen to me very carefully," Teo said, her voice shaking just a little. "I have found something. Something very big." Teo did not wait for an answer. She called the emergency line to the United Nations. Within minutes, alarms started ringing all over the building. People ran down the white hallways. Telephones rang without stopping. The head of the Space Defense Center, a serious man named Director Kim, came to Teo's desk. He looked at her screens for a long time without speaking. "Show me everything," he finally said. Teo showed him the data. She pointed to each signal, each number, each mark on the map. She explained what the speed meant. She explained what the number of ships meant. Director Kim's face became very pale. He left the room without a word and went to call the leaders of the world. Around the world, similar alarms were ringing. In New York, in London, in Beijing, in Moscow, and in hundreds of other places, scientists and military leaders were looking at the same information. Spaceships, hundreds of them, coming to Earth, coming now. Commander Park Jun was asleep in his small apartment when his telephone rang. He was the chief military strategist for the United Nations, a strong man with gray in his hair and many years of hard decisions behind him. He listened to the voice on the phone tell him about the ships. He did not ask many questions. He simply dressed, drove to the UN building in his gray car, and walked into the main conference room where world leaders were gathering through video screens. The room was full of noise and fear. Everyone was speaking at once, asking questions that had no answers. Park Jun walked to the head of the long table and raised his hand. The room became quiet. "We must stay calm," he said in a clear, strong voice. "We must think like soldiers and leaders, not like frightened people. First, we will know all the facts. Second, we will prepare our defenses. Third, we will try to talk to them before we fight them. Do you understand me?" The world leaders, looking at screens from different countries, agreed with Park Jun. They knew he was right. Fear was not useful. Facts and planning were useful. Within the hour, the ships became visible to the human eye. They appeared in the sky above major cities. In Tokyo, people looked up and saw shadows blocking the stars. In London, people ran from their homes and stared at the huge metal forms that hung above them like dark clouds. In New York, the ships covered the sky from one side of the city to the other. They were so big that people could not believe what they were seeing. The ships did not attack. They did not fire any weapons. They simply waited in the sky above the world. Then a message came through every radio, every telephone, every computer, every television set on Earth. It came in all human languages at the same time. The voice was strange and cold, not quite male and not quite female. It spoke slowly and clearly so everyone could understand. "People of Earth, we are the Krell Dominion. We have traveled many light years through the space between stars to reach your world. Your planet, your people, your cities, and all you have made will become part of our dominion. You have two choices. You can give us your world without fighting, and we will keep some of you alive as workers. Or you can fight us, and we will destroy everything and everyone. You have 12 hours to decide. After 12 hours, we will accept your decision with weapons." The message stopped. The ships did nothing. They simply hung in the sky and waited. Park Jun looked at the faces of world leaders around him. Some faces showed fear. Some showed anger. All of them showed the weight of an impossible choice. He turned to look at the screens showing Tae-oh in Seoul. She was listening to everything. "Dr. Tae-oh," Park Jun said, "can we fight these ships? Tell me the truth." Tae-oh closed her eyes for a moment. She had already run the calculations. She had already looked at the numbers. The answer was clear and terrible. "No, Commander," she said quietly. "We cannot fight them. Our weapons are like throwing stones at mountains. These ships are too big, too strong, too many. If we attack them, they will destroy us very quickly." The room became very still. Some world leaders put their heads in their hands. Others stared at empty space, thinking about their families, their countries, their world. They had 12 hours to decide if human civilization would continue or if it would end. In Seoul, Tae-oh sat in her chair and looked at the data on her screens. Somewhere in the dark sky above her city, the Krell ships waited. She thought about Min-ae, about her family, about all the people sleeping in their homes, not knowing that tomorrow might never come. She did not know it yet, but somewhere in the Krell ships, the alien commander was about to make a mistake. A mistake that would change everything. And in a quiet room in the UN building, Ambassador Jimin was preparing to do something that had never been done before. She was preparing to talk to creatures from another world, to try to find words that might save her entire species. She did not know if it was possible, but she knew she had to try. The 12 hours passed like a bad dream. The world leaders gathered in secure bunkers deep underground. Military bases across the planet were on the highest alert. Soldiers stood ready at their posts, though they all knew that their weapons would do little good against the alien ships. People on the streets of every major city looked up at the dark shapes blocking the sky and prayed. Ambassador Jimin sat in a small room at the UN building. She wore a dark blue dress and had her hands folded on the table in front of her. She was a woman in her 50s, with kind eyes and a voice that could make people listen. She had spent her whole life finding words to solve problems between nations. Now she had to find words that might solve the biggest problem in human history. Commander Park Jun walked into the room. He looked like he had not slept. "Are you ready?" he asked her. "No," Jimin answered, but she stood up and prepared to make contact with the Krell commander. "But I will do it anyway." The communication line opened. Screens came alive with images of the alien commander. He was not like anything from Earth. His skin was gray and smooth like metal. His eyes were large and dark, like pools of oil. He had no nose that humans could see. When he spoke, his mouth moved in strange ways that hurt to watch. "I am Krell Commander Vexthor," he said in the same cold voice that had spoken to all of Earth. "You are the human representative. You have come to surrender your world." Jimin took a deep breath. "Commander Vexthor, I am Ambassador Jimin of the United Nations of Earth. I have come to ask if we can talk before your people attack. Perhaps we can find a solution that does not require violence." The Krell commander made a sound like metal scraping on metal. It was his laugh. "There is nothing to talk about, human. Your world will be ours. I am here to tell you of your weakness. I am here to show you that resistance is impossible." "Then why not show us what you have shown other worlds?" Jimin asked carefully. She was playing for time, trying to understand the aliens' minds. "If you are so strong, why not show us your greatest power? The Krell commander seemed pleased by this question. Pride filled his dark eyes. You wish to see the weapon that has taken 1,000 worlds? You wish to understand your own defeat before it comes? He paused. Very well. It is good for you to know the power of the Krell. It is good for you to understand that we are unstoppable. He turned away from the screen and spoke in his own harsh language. On his ship, large machines began to move. Energy started to flow through cables and tubes. The Krell were preparing something. In the bunkers across Earth, scientists watched their instruments go crazy. What is happening? Teo asked urgently, watching her screens in Seoul. The readings made no sense. There was energy, but not like any weapon she had ever studied. The energy was not exploding or burning. It was something else, something that moved like information. Then it began. Every computer on Earth came alive at once. Every phone, every television, every radio, every screen filled with images and sounds. But these were not normal broadcasts. The images were designed to upset people, to make them angry at each other. The messages were designed to make families fight with families. The sounds and images were designed to confuse and separate. News broadcasts suddenly showed stories that were not true, but seemed true. Social networks filled with information that made people hate each other. Radios played messages that made neighbors turn against neighbors. The sounds and images were so strong, so clever, that people could not help but believe them. It was not an attack with fire or explosions. It was an attack on the human mind. It was an attack on truth itself. Jimin watched from the UN building as chaos started. People outside the bunkers were running in the streets, confused and frightened. Some were fighting each other. Some were destroying things. Families were breaking apart. The information was so powerful, so carefully made, that people believed what they saw even though the things they saw were not real. This is our greatest weapon, the Krell commander said, his voice filling the room with pride. This is the power that has destroyed 1,000 civilizations. We do not need fire or explosions. We do not need to kill your bodies. We simply fill your minds with our messages. We make you fight each other. We make your civilization eat itself from inside like a sick animal. He leaned closer to the screen. Your people will turn on each other. Your armies will not follow their leaders because they will not believe them. Your families will break apart. Your cities will fall into chaos not from our weapons, but from your own confusion and anger. Your civilization will die from inside while we wait above your world. This is the power of the Krell. This is why 1,000 worlds are ours. Park Jun watched from his command center. Military leaders were reporting that soldiers were refusing orders because they no longer trusted what they were being told. People were flooding the phone lines, fighting about what was real and what was false. Hospitals were filling with people who had been hurt by other people, not by alien weapons. "Turn it off," Jimin said to the Krell commander. "You have shown us your power. Turn it off." But Vexthor did not turn it off. He kept the weapon running, watching as human civilization began to crack and break from inside. "In 3 hours I will turn it off," he said. "Then you will know what the rest of your world will be like, forever." Teo sat in her chair in Seoul, watching the data on her screens. She saw the strange energy patterns. She understood what the weapon was, and in that moment, something began to form in her mind. An idea. A small idea at first, like a light in darkness. She picked up her phone and called Minne again. "I need everything you can find," she said urgently. "Search for the year 1997. Search for information wars. Search for weapons bans. Search for everything from that time." "Why?" Minne asked, confused. "Because I think I know how to stop them," Teo said. "But I need you to help me find something from a very long time ago." And in his ship above Earth, the Krell commander watched humanity tear itself apart. He had no idea that the answer to his greatest weapon had already been written many years ago by people who had never known the aliens would come. The Krell weapon continued to pour into human minds for 3 long hours. People fought in the streets. Families argued until they stopped speaking to each other. Trust fell apart like old paper. But something strange started to happen in the bunkers underground. Scientists and leaders began to notice something. In Seoul, Min A worked with great speed. She ran through the archives of the Seoul National Archives, pulling out old documents from 1997. Papers yellowed with age filled her desk. News articles from computers that no longer worked were printed out. Historical records from a time when most of the world was not even thinking about space or aliens. She searched for every mention of information warfare, of psychological weapons, of anything that might help. And then she found it. A thick folder marked Geneva Convention 1997, Information Warfare Ban. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside were documents signed by almost every nation on Earth. These papers were from a time when humans had fought each other with new kinds of weapons using information and lies. Nations had used false information to make other nations' people turn against their own leaders. It had been a small war, but a terrible one. And humanity had decided in 1997 that this kind of weapon would be banned forever. Min-A photographed every page with her phone and sent them to Teo. At the Space Defense Center in Seoul, Teo received the files and read them quickly. Her eyes grew wide. The documents were old, written in formal language, signed by diplomats and leaders from a century that seemed very far away. But the words were clear. No nation could use information warfare. No nation could create weapons that made people distrust each other. It was illegal. It was against the law of all nations on Earth. She looked at the Krell weapon and looked at the Geneva Convention. The Krell weapon was exactly what had been banned in 1997. Teo ran to Commander Park Jun's office. He was sitting at his desk, looking at reports that showed chaos in every city on Earth. His face was gray with worry. When Teo came in, he looked up slowly. "Commander, I have found something," Teo said. She put the documents on his desk. "This is from 1997. This is the Geneva Convention on Information Warfare. This weapon, what the Krell are using, it is exactly what this convention bans." Park Jun read the documents slowly. He read the words that said no nation could use this kind of attack. He read the signatures of leaders from all nations. And then he did something unexpected. He began to laugh. At first it was a small laugh, just a sound from deep in his chest. But then it grew. It became a real laugh, the kind of laugh that comes from understanding a joke that the universe had just told. The laugh grew until his whole body shook. People came running into his office, wondering if something was wrong with him. "What is it?" Ji-min asked from the other room, hearing the sound. "Get me a line to the Krell commander," Park Jun said, still laughing. "And get me every legal document from 1997. Every single one." Ji-min did not understand, but she knew that Park Jun was not a man who laughed without reason. She quickly made the connection to the Krell commander. Vexthor's face appeared on the screen, and he looked angry that he had been interrupted. "What do you want, human?" the Krell demanded. "Do you come to surrender?" Park Jun walked into the room. He was still smiling, though he had stopped laughing. He sat down in front of the screen and looked directly at the alien commander. Then he did something very simple. He yawned. A long, deep, real yawn. He covered his mouth with his hand and stretched in his chair. The Krell commander did not understand what he was seeing. Humans were supposed to be afraid. Humans were supposed to be breaking apart inside. Humans were supposed to be surrendering. But this human was yawning. "I appreciate you showing us your weapon," Park Jun said calmly, as if they were discussing the weather. "But I'm afraid we're going to have to ask you to stop using it. You see, we have a problem." "A problem?" Vexthor said, confused. "Yes," Park Jun said. "You violated the Geneva Convention on Information Warfare. We signed it in 1997. Every nation on Earth agreed that information warfare was not allowed. And now, you are using a weapon that is exactly what that convention bans. There was a long silence. The Krell commander seemed to not understand what the human was saying. "It is just a treaty," Vexthor said finally. "It means nothing against the power of the Krell." But Park Jun was already standing. He had Min-A and Teo and Jimin working together. They were pulling together every document, every law, every piece of paper that mentioned the ban on information warfare. They were gathering evidence. They were building a case. "You are right," Park Jun said to the Krell commander. "It is just a treaty. But here is something interesting. We have found that you yourself have signed similar treaties with the Galactic Council. We have found that the Krell Dominion is part of the larger galactic legal system, and that system, Commander, has rules about information warfare too." Jimin took over the communication. She was a diplomat, and this was her moment. She spoke to Vexthor not as an enemy, but as someone who understood laws and rules. She explained that the Galactic Legal Code, which the Krell themselves had helped to create, explicitly banned the kind of weapon he was using. "You cannot use a weapon that breaks your own laws," Jimin said. "If you do, the Intergalactic Justice Council will hear about it, and they will not be happy." For the first time, doubt appeared in the Krell commander's eyes. He had come to Earth believing that the humans were weak and primitive. He had expected them to break apart, but instead, they were quoting laws and treaties. They were speaking about legal procedures and galactic justice councils. "This is unexpected," Vexthor said slowly. In the bunkers around the world, people began to understand what was happening. The information that the Krell had been sending stopped spreading. It ran into walls of legal documents and historical records. The simple fact that something was against the rules seemed to be stopping the aliens from continuing their attack. Park Jun leaned back in his chair, still with that small smile on his face. Teo and Min-A and Ji-Min looked at each other in the Seoul office. They had found something that the Krell had not expected. They had found a weapon that was older than spaceships and stronger than weapons of destruction. They had found the law. The Krell weapon continued to run, but its power was weakening. It was like watching a storm lose its strength. The false information that had seemed so real and so powerful a moment ago was now being blocked by something much simpler and much older: the law. Commander Park Jun sat in the main communications room. He was dressed in his military uniform, the one he wore only for the most important moments. Cameras were being set up all around him. The world was going to see what he was about to do. "When I speak to the Krell commander," he told Jimin and Teo, "I want the entire world to watch. I want every living human to understand what is happening. We are not fighting with weapons. We are fighting with words and law and history." Jimin nodded. She understood what Park Jun was planning. It was bold, and it was strange. But sometimes the strangest plans are the ones that work. Teo held in her hands all the documents they had gathered: treaties from 1997, legal papers from the Galactic Justice Council, historical records showing that the Krell themselves had agreed to ban information warfare many years ago. It was all there, all the evidence they needed. The cameras came on. In every part of the world, in bunkers and shelters, people watched. The children were brought to screens. The elderly were helped to see. Billions of humans watched as Park Jun sat down in front of a camera and prepared to speak to the aliens. "When I give the signal," Park Jun told everyone, "I want you all to understand something. We are not weak. We are not going to break. We are human, and we have laws, and we believe in those laws. That is our strength." The connection to the Krell ship came through. Vexthor's face appeared on screens everywhere. His dark eyes looked confused and angry. He had expected the human to be scared. He had expected to see fear. But what he saw was something else. Park Jun stretched in his chair. He rolled his neck, hearing it crack. He looked up at the cameras and at the Krell commander's face. And then, in that moment where the whole world was watching, where the aliens were waiting for a human to beg for mercy, Park Jun yawned. It was a real yawn, the kind that comes when a person is tired. He opened his mouth wide and closed his eyes. He stretched his arms. When he finished, he looked directly at Vexthor. "We appreciate the demonstration of your weapon," Park Jun said in a calm, almost bored voice. "It was impressive, I suppose. But we're actually going to have to ask you to shut it off. You see, you violated the Geneva Convention on Information Warfare. We signed it in 1997. It's in our legal frameworks, and frankly, most galactic treaties reference it. You cannot continue." The words were simple. The words were almost nothing. But the way Park Jun said them, with no fear and no anger, changed everything. He said the words like a person who was tired of listening to a child's story. He said the words like someone who knew he was right. Vexithor tried to speak, but Jimin took over the communication. She was the diplomat, and this was her role. She presented documents and papers. She showed the Krell commander the exact words from the Galactic Charter of Peaceful Coexistence. She read, word by word, the parts that said information warfare was not allowed. "These are your own laws, Commander," Jimin said. "These are laws that the Krell agreed to when you joined the larger galactic community. You cannot use a weapon that breaks your own laws." Min-A appeared on the screen behind Jimin. She held up the original papers from 1997. She explained to the Krell commander how humans had suffered before, how they had learned that information warfare destroyed from inside. She explained how, because of that suffering, every nation on Earth had agreed that this kind of weapon would be illegal forever. "And," Min-A said carefully, "we found that your own legal code says the same thing. It seems that many civilizations have learned this lesson. Many civilizations have been hurt by this weapon, and so many civilizations agreed to ban it." The Krell commander's face turned darker. His mouth moved in strange ways. He was angry, but he was also confused. He had come to conquer Earth with his greatest weapon. He had expected victory, but instead he was being told that his weapon was illegal, even by his own rules. "This is not possible," Vexthor said. "The weapon is our greatest power." "Then why is it illegal?" Park Jun asked. His voice was still calm, still almost bored. "Why did your own civilization agree to ban it? Why did so many other civilizations agree to ban it? If it is so great and so powerful, why is it forbidden?" There was no answer. Because the answer was that the weapon was too powerful. The weapon did not just defeat enemies, it destroyed everything. It broke civilizations from inside. It made people turn on each other. It was so terrible that every civilization that had ever fought with it agreed it should never be used again. But the Krell, in their pride, had kept it. They had hidden it in their greatest ships. They had believed that no one would know about it. They had believed they could use it without the Galactic Justice Council ever finding out. Now they were caught. World leaders from every nation on Earth came forward. They stood together on camera. Russians and Americans stood side by side. Chinese and Japanese stood together. Africans and Europeans stood together. For the first time in human history, every single nation, every single leader spoke with one voice. "We declare," the leader of every nation said together, "that we will not accept this weapon. We declare that this weapon violates laws that we have agreed to follow. We call upon the Intergalactic Justice Council to hear this case." And then something unexpected happened. The call went out across space, through the galactic networks that connected 1,000 worlds. The Intergalactic Justice Council heard the case. They listened to humanity explain about the ban from 1997. They listened to the Krell explain about their weapon, and they made a decision. The weapon was illegal. The Krell had broken their own laws. and if the Krell wanted to remain part of the galactic community, they had to face legal punishment. Vexthor's face on the screen became very still. He understood what had happened. He had come to Earth to conquer a weak, primitive world. Instead, he had been caught breaking the laws of the entire galactic civilization, and there was no way out. "Very well," the Krell commander said slowly. "We will comply with the law. But know this, humans. You have made a dangerous enemy today." "No," Park Jun said. "We have simply reminded everyone, including you, that there are rules. Rules that all of us, even the strong ones, must follow. That is not making an enemy. That is maintaining civilization." The Krell weapon shut down. Instantly, the false information stopped flowing. Instantly, people's minds became clear again. In cities around the world, families looked at each other and began to understand what had happened. In hospitals, people were helped to realize they had been confused and frightened by lies. And in the command center in Seoul, Park Jun, Jimin, Min-A, and Tayo stood together and watched as the Krell ships began to power down their weapons. They had won. Not with weapons, not with strength, but with law and history and the simple power of knowing they were right. The world had learned something that day. The pen was indeed mightier than the sword. The law was stronger than any weapon. And sometimes, the most powerful thing a human could do was simply yawn and ask someone to follow the rules.